My name is Dr. Sean Golden, and welcome to Golden Health Method. Today we're going to be talking about the secret macronutrient, besides protein, that is very important for fat loss. And that is fiber. Now, fiber kind of is and isn't a macronutrient. It's usually categorized under the carbs, but it acts completely different from carbohydrates, so I actually count it as a completely separate macronutrient because it really doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the carbs. It's not digested the same way, it doesn't have the same effects on the body, it's just completely different. So in my mind, it's a separate macronutrient. Now, most people within the fitness, either fitness industry or whether they know about a lot about fitness and health and fat loss and dieting and all that type of thing, will understand the importance of protein when it comes to trying to lose fat while trying to retain muscle. While you don't need protein to lose fat, it's very helpful because let's say somebody diets down from random numbers, 150 pounds down to 100 pounds, and they did that on a low protein diet, then that's going to have them lose a lot of muscle. So a lot of that weight isn't going to be really fat loss. But if they had a high protein diet and they had resistance training in there and a lot of exercise, well, now and they still went from 150 to 100 pounds, a lot more of that percentage of what they lost is going to be pure fat now and way less muscle. So that's how protein can help with fat loss. When traditionally people set up their diets, they kind of think in terms of the big three: the protein, the carbs, and the fats. Earlier research was hinting to this idea that a high protein, low carb diet would give you more favorable effects in terms of body composition, in that you would lose more fat, retain more muscle. And now we know, after decades of research, when you look at all the studies combined, that it wasn't really the low carb aspect of the diets that was responsible for the extra fat and weight lost. It was the high protein aspect of the diet. So low carb diets generally tend to have higher protein that comes along with them. For example, meats, cheeses, other types of dairy, and eggs, as examples, are not only high in fat, they're also very high in protein. So generally those two things kind of come together, which is why the higher fat, higher protein diets were getting good results. However, when we tested later on in different studies, the same amount of protein, but just had more carbs and less fat, long term it made no difference. Short term it can make a difference, just based on satiety. The low carb dieting can sometimes make you feel full sooner, but that doesn't last forever. The studies show that if you diet for half a year to a year, usually the satiety effect kind of goes away, and they end up having equal effects. So as long as the protein is at a certain level, the ratio of carbs to fat doesn't really seem to make a whole lot of difference. And that's more up to personal preference, what you prefer, what keeps you full, and also what you can do in a healthy manner. So if your fat's going to be coming from bacon and sausage and that type of thing, then you might not want to go that route just for long-term health, although it might not affect a whole lot of short-term dieting efforts. All right, moving on to our main topic of this video, though, is fiber. Because most of the people think in terms of the big three: the protein, the carbs, and the fat, but they don't really think about fiber, and it turns to have a very important impact on fat loss and potentially muscle growth. So there's different types of fibers, and you can classify them in many different ways. The way that's important for this video and what I'm going to be talking about is all the types of fiber that's fermentable in the body. So it doesn't matter if it's soluble, insoluble, any other form of definition of fiber you want to talk about. The only type I'm going to be concerned about in this video is whether it's fermentable, which means when you eat the fiber, when it goes down to your colon, can the bacteria in your colon ferment that fiber, use it for energy, and then the bacteria can excrete short-chain fatty acids after you eat it? So that's what I'm going to be concerned about. So first, let's talk about what I mean when I'm saying fermented fiber and all this type of thing. So as an example, when you eat an apple, some of the fiber in the apple is in the form of a fiber called pectin. And pectin is a fermentable fiber, so when you eat it, it'll go down into your colon, it'll go through your small intestine into your large intestine. When it hits your large intestine, the bacteria there can eat that pectin. and they poop out short-chain fatty acids. The most well-known is butyrate, but there's also propionate and acetate. It doesn't really matter. They have slightly different effects, but for this video, we're just going to call them, in general, short-chain fatty acids. And then these short-chain fatty acids are not only beneficial for your colon, but they can get absorbed actually into your bloodstream and affect all the other tissues in your body, including your muscles and fat cells and your liver, which is going to be very important in a second. So what we now know is that the short-chain fatty acids are very efficiently used for fuel. And what that means is your body wants to use these short-chain fatty acids that these bacteria excreted as energy to power your cells, which makes sense. If any of you know what medium-chain fatty acids are or medium-chain triglycerides, you can even buy MCT oil. And these are medium-chain fats that are found in things like coconut oil that are used more effectively and efficiently for energy than longer-chain fatty acids you would find in pretty much every other source of fat that you would eat. Now, these short-chain fatty acids are even shorter than medium-chain. So you have the long-chain, the medium-chain, and then all the way down here are short-chain. To give you an example, most long-chain fatty acids are 18 units long, 18 carbon chains long, that you consume in your diet. Most medium chain are anywhere between 8 to 12 carbon lengths long, and the short chain are between 1 and 4 carbon lengths long. So they're very, very tiny, but they're still fatty acids, and they're used very efficiently for fuel, and they essentially cannot get stored as fat. So while they can get used for energy, and so they do have calories that come with them, when you think about the medium chain triglycerides or medium chain fatty acids, having a harder time storing those as fat compared to the long chain, well, it's even way more so for the short chain fatty acids. You essentially can't store them as fat. But even more than that, they upregulate fat burning processes in our body. So when you eat the soluble fiber, especially if you eat quite a bit of it, we know that after we poop out these short chain fatty acids and they get absorbed into our bloodstream, that when they go to our liver, they upregulate enzymes that are involved in oxidizing fat. So it not only helps to oxidize those short-chain fatty acids, it actually helps to oxidize other forms of fat as well. So whole body fat oxidation increases. Same thing happens in muscle and slightly in the adipocytes and the fat cells as well. So it has this whole body effect on fat oxidation. Pretty much almost every single human study has now shown that when we have a meal that's high in these soluble fibers, a high percentage of that meal is soluble fibers. An example would be beans. Beans have a very high amount of soluble fibers in them. That when you look at the fat oxidation compared to a meal that had the same amount of carbs, but those carbs were not fibrous carbs, they were just regular carbs that would be burned as glucose, for example, then the fat oxidation from the fiber meal is way higher than the fat oxidation from the normal meal. And what this does over time, what we see in a bunch of mouse studies, and now we're starting to see it in the human studies as well, is it has a calorie partitioning effect, meaning that while it doesn't have a huge effect on total body expenditure of calories, meaning, it doesn't just make your body start burning off calories like crazy, it doesn't do that, but what it does do is it selectively burns more fat for energy and less carbs for energy. And what that seems to do, what the rodent studies have shown for over a decade that does in multiple trials, is that after feeding high fiber diets to rats over a period of, let's say, 12 weeks, the rats not only lose fat, they also gain a little bit of muscle. And most of these studies, the rats aren't even exercising. So it's just the fact of nutrient partitioning in that case. And now we're seeing in some studies, while we've seen over and over and over that high fiber diets improve insulin sensitivity in humans, we don't always see a drop in weight. And what that might be from, we're now recognizing, is that they might actually be dropping a little bit of fat, but then also creating a little bit of muscle to make up for it. So the total weight doesn't really change a whole lot, but you do get some fat loss and possibly some muscle growth with that. Again, one thing to look out for when you start implementing a bunch of fiber into your diet is to do it slowly and in steps. You don't want to just start piling on a bunch of fiber all at once, or you're going to be, stinking up the room like crazy. So, very slowly allow your colon and your body to adjust to the increase in fiber. One quick little tip with beans, just because I mentioned those already, is let's say if you use canned beans, for example, there's a particular type of carb that's in fiber type carb that's in the beans, and it gets when it's in the can, it's in liquid, it actually goes into the liquid. So what you want to do is you want to drain the liquid and replace it with regular water and rinse it off and stuff like that. That'll actually allow that carb to wash away, and that will definitely decrease the amount of stinkiness that you create from the beans compared to if you left that in there. Plus, with canned foods like beans, you want to drain it and replace the liquid anyway, because there's BPA that's going to leach from the sides of the can, and you don't want to consume all that either. So just rinse the beans with regular water, wash them, and you can just heat them up in the microwave or something that way. Now, one of the most effective ways to increase fiber in your diet is actually in the form of resistant starch. So there's different types of fiber. One of them is classified as resistant starch, and that's a very easy and a very effective way to have these effects that we're talking about the fiber can create. So if you're interested in how to use resistant starch, or even what is resistant starch, or what's the best one to use to create these effects, make sure you check out the next video. It's in the description below here. So check out that video if you want to learn more about resistant starch. Otherwise, guys, I hope you gained some valuable information from this video. I hope this helps you, and I'll see you in the next one.